Hello, I'm Sunday, and welcome to another installment of me trying to find romance books that are actually good. This time, we're headed into our first romantasy with Iron and Embers by Helen Scheuerer. Okay. Anyway, I feel like I have to give a disclaimer because this book is apparently connected to other books in a different series, and I did not know that when I started reading. So to prevent any shifting opinions, I didn't look any further into those books, and I'm just judging it as a standalone. The book starts out with some exposition about a prophecy and the 5-year Shadow War. This was fine, but it didn't feel super necessary because this information is mentioned many times through the story. We move on to meeting our heroine, Ren, as she's poisoning a man. Which, alright girl, I can get behind this. Turns out this guy was on her list of people involved with the evil side of the war, and she spent 5 years hunting them all down to avenge her sister's death. This is actually one of the most important things we learn about Ren. She has not processed any of her trauma in the slightest. Then we meet our main male character, Geralt, Torj, who's an elite type of warrior called a Witcher, Warsword, with silver shoulder-length hair and a gruff personality. He's in a bar fight, and it's going pretty well because he has the time to spend most of the chapter reminiscing about how much power he had during the war, and the time where he tried to date Ren, but she turned him down because she's royalty and he's a warrior, so that's a big no-no. She did offer a one-night stand, but he turned that down because he liked her too much. So, despite being a queen, Ren lives in a rundown shack because her kingdom was destroyed in the war, and she's too caught up in her revenge quest to make any effort to restore it, so fuck anyone else who lives there, I guess. She finds her old friend Kip waiting for her, who's like, "Hey girl, how's the alchemy thing going?" Ren's internal dialogue reveals that she wanted to go to the Alchemy College of Drevenor, but couldn't get in because her mentor wouldn't write her a letter of recommendation. So she hasn't really been up to much outside of killing people. She also has a little bit of a PTSD moment where she has a flashback of the death of her two closest friends, her older sister, and her own near-death experience, where she was saved by Torj cauterizing her neck wound shut. Kip snaps her out of it, though, and tells her that he's taking her to Thesmar, whether she likes it or not, because she's been summoned, and off they go. I feel like I need to point out that the back-and-forth perspective gets a bit jarring in this book, because almost nothing will happen in one person's chapter before it switches to the other, so for my sake and yours, I'm going to clump the relevant information together. So we're back to Torj. He meets his friend Wilder, who tells him all of the war swords are being summoned back to Thesmar because there was an assassination attempt against a king. I'm not sure how bringing all of the big tough warriors back to their guild helps protect against future assassination attempts, but it's fine. We need to get this man to the same spot as Ren somehow, so alright. There's also maybe 12 war swords, so the kingdoms aren't very well protected anyway. Torj thinks back about the memorial for the war where Ren sobbed in his arms and then looked up at him like, "Hey, do you want to hook up now?" And luckily, Torj said no, which makes him slightly better than some of these other main male characters. He also thinks about a time 2 years ago where he was charged to get the same noble Ren was trying to kill to prison. They ran into each other in the hallway outside of his room, and Torj fucking chloroformed Ren and left her in the hall while he got the noble out. It didn't matter though, because Ren managed to poison him anyway, which made Torj lose his promotion offer that would have let him travel outside the mid-realms, so they aren't exactly on great terms. Back in the present, Ren and Kip get to Thesmar and are greeted by the guildmaster Audra, Ren's younger sister and warsword Thea, and Ren's former mentor Farissa. Farissa shows her the knife that was used in the assassination attempt and tells her it's coated with some sort of chemical that makes royals lose their magic. Royalty are the only ones capable of using magic in this world, so this is crazy stuff. Farissa wants her help in figuring out an antidote, and Audra shows her the crisp letter of recommendation to Drevenor if the threat of being assassinated wasn't enough to convince her. Torj also arrives at Thesmar and is told by Audra that he's being assigned to protect Ren as she goes to the Alchemy College. He's like, fuck no, but she dangles that one promotion he lost in front of him and he's like, fine. They aren't the only ones on the journey though, because they get shipped out with Farissa, Kip, and Cal, who is another warsword. Farissa asks Ren if she knows why she denied her the letter of recommendation for so long, and I was immediately like, because she's been killing people? And sure enough, Ren didn't even make this connection somehow. The people she's been killing suck, but you can't be shocked when your old teacher doesn't want you to go to dangerous chemical school when you're already committing murder. On the trip, Torj talks to Farissa about his scars because they've been bothering him. They were given to him by Ren as a side effect of the magic that she imbued him with during the war. She has lightning powers. They sail for a while, but nothing super exciting happens besides Ren's regular nightmares and occasional sexual tension with Torj. So they arrive at Trevnor, and everyone goes to this welcome gala, and every single person except Torj has the drinks, and the chancellor of the school, Belcourt, comes out and tells them they all just failed their first test. Whoops. Belcourt goes on to tell them about the gauntlet, which is like the most infamous and big deal test, and it determines whether or not they move to the next level of education, and then he dismisses them. Torj and Ren go to their rooms to find their adjoining for extra protection. It sounds more like they're gonna need extra protection, am I right? And speaking of this, they keep being turned on by each other despite their deep hatred, but they wanted to fuck prior, so I can't hold it against them as much as other couples. Nothing happens though, and for the first day of school, all of the students are brought out to see a guy tied to a tree. One of the professors reads them their oath and tells them the guy on the tree broke his, so he's going to be an example for them. He's forced to take a potion, and then they use this artifact to take all of his memories. And this is visible to everyone. Like, there's just a crowd of students watching this man's entire life play out rapidly on some sort of, like, magical projection. They all have to sign the oath by pressing their cut fingers into it, and after everyone is done, the professor is like, great, you've all been poisoned. They get assigned into teams that they have to stick with for their time there, and Ren is joined by Xavier, with a Z, and Odessa, who goes by Dessa, because most of the characters in this book need shortened names for some reason. Dessa is nice, but Xavier is another edgy guy, because one is never enough. Xavier knows his poison was wolfbane, but he built up a natural immunity, so he's just fine, I guess. Dessa and Ren are in worse shape, but they both manage to figure theirs out, and everyone passes the test. It's also mentioned in this chapter that when Ren reminisces about something, she just totally spaces out. So just remember when I'm explaining one of her many, many flashbacks to you, that she's just standing there, staring at a wall in the present. For their next test, they have to make a poison, and Ren considers killing Xavier. He's been standoffish at this point, but never directly antagonistic towards her, so I don't really know where this hostility is coming from. But while this all is happening, Torj is given a list of people who are also known to have magical scars, so he can start doing some research into his own. It's weird that he's been assigned to be Ren's bodyguard, but since he can't attend all of her lessons with her, he isn't doing much guarding through the book. Like, she could just get poisoned in one of her classes, but he's off strolling through town on a side quest. Anyway, he finds the dad of one of the guys who had magical scars and is told he killed himself after suffering through horrible nightmares. So the prognosis isn't looking great so far, but Torj decides to keep looking into it. On his way out of town, he sees some flyers for the People's Vanguard, which is an organization against royalty. It's bold to just hang up flyers around town for your anti-royalty organization, but I guess I can respect it. On another day, Ren and Torj are walking through the campus garden and see a weird tree that Ren wants to take a sample of, but Torj won't let her because it's gross. I'm not really sure why he's stopping her, because she's the alchemist here. She's supposed to be doing alchemist things, and I imagine that involves touching a lot of gross shit. I'm not even sure if the tree is important, because this isn't brought up again in this book, but I figured I'd mention it in case it comes up again in one of the others. Like, it seemed important at the time, but that's all there was to this. When they get back to Ren's room, they find her door open and things lightly ransacked, but not in a super noticeable way. So yeah, while they were gone, Torj did not station someone outside of her room. Maybe the whole flashback of him failing to protect the one noble Ren killed was supposed to tell us that he's a shit bodyguard. But the rest of the day passes without issue, so it's fine, I guess. Ren sneaks out later, but Torj manages to intercept her and pins her up against the wall when they hear a noise. And I know the vision is sexy, but from a bodyguard perspective, it makes no sense, because you've essentially just turned your back on the potential assassin and prevented your charge from easily running away if things get bad. Guys, is Torj meant to be a bad bodyguard? With how often these things keep happening, I'm starting to think this is on purpose. And to make things worse, he gets hard while he's pinning her, and Ren uses that against him to stab him with her hairpin that's coated in a drug to knock him out. I really hope he doesn't have a performance review coming, because this is fucking abysmal, Torj. Ren continues on her walk over to a brothel because she found a note in her room from someone who knows she's the poisoner, and they asked her to meet them there. Torj isn't far behind, but immediately gets covered in women because he can't enter a room without every lady in a 30-foot radius wanting to touch his big giant muscles. Ren spots Xavier, who reveals he was the one who planted the note and knows she's been killing nobles. Torj claws his way over and is understandably pissed that Ren would follow a mysterious note from a stranger alone. I also didn't put down any extra notes about the way this conversation went between Torj, Ren, and Xavier, so I'm going to assume it wasn't very important because it clearly didn't stand out to me. But as they're leaving, a rogue carriage almost hits them, so Torj pins Ren to the wall for a second time that night. The whole appeal of one character pinning another is that it's like a special treat when they aren't involved yet. It's that, like, delicious closeness that they would have rarely had up until that point. So why is it happening again? Like, so close to each other, too. Like, I would get it if it's at the beginning of the book and at the end. This is, like, same chapter. And also, Torj is apparently hard for hours after that. So I'm adding him to the list of main male characters who need to see a doctor. Torj is allowed to come to the next lesson, so he forces Ren to ride on his horse, and they spend the whole time teasing each other, which must have been so awkward for Dessa, who was riding right next to them. They get to a hospice and find Xavier already there. The test is to just help people, so that's kind of nice that they get to serve the community between the lessons where their school is actively trying to kill them. Torj is also immediately surrounded by women again, in case you were curious. Dessa burns her hair while preparing something, which causes Ren to have a PTSD attack, and she fully passes out. She wakes up in Torj's arms after having horrible memories of her loved ones dying, and gets horny. Yeah. Okay. They go to head back to the school, but Ren gets fucking body slammed as they're walking out, which I'm going to sound like a broken record, but where the fuck were you, Torj? Why are you here? A bunch of masked attackers jump out and they both fight them off. Ren uses her magic, but it's been pretty unstable, so she accidentally just fucking eviscerates a man. He was a bad guy though, so it's fine. One of them manages to put manacles on Ren that dull her powers and then make her start to pass out. It's fine though, because Torj kills the rest of them single-handedly and saves her. When they get the manacles off, Ren realizes they're very similar to a prototype that she made several years ago to suppress her sister Thea's magic. It doesn't say why, but I have a feeling that that happened at some point in the other books in this series. Once they get back to the school, everyone is told they're no longer having lessons outside the school grounds because Ren ruined it for everybody. Belcourt pulls Ren aside and asks about the manacles and if anyone else would know how to make them. The only people who would know were Sam and Ida, Ren's two friends who are very much dead now, so it's a total mystery. Their next lesson is taught by a guest lecturer and Torj, of all people. Luckily, it's combat lessons and not bodyguarding. This scene is just there to give Ren and Torj more time together, but it makes it seem like none of her peers like her because she's the one kid who has to partner up with the teacher. She isn't particularly enjoyable to be around though, so I kinda get it. We get some backstory on Dessa when she hangs out with Ren and tells her about her dad has dementia and her home was destroyed in the war, and I shit you not, the line that we get is that Ren had been so caught up in her own grief that she forgot she wasn't the only one that suffered losses. Unfortunately, I'm not used to writers being good, so I'm hoping that Ren coming off as self-absorbed and out of touch is an intentional choice. It's already been really clear that she hasn't processed her trauma at all in the 5 years since the war, so I want to think this is a character-building moment and not just Ren ignoring that a war could have affected more people than just her. Dessa and Ren go to the library with Cal, who's standing in as Ren's bodyguard while Torj is off shift. Cal is also a war sword, in case you forgot. He's a good character, but not super important to the overall story, so he doesn't get brought up much. When they get to the library, Ren feels her powers doing some weird stuff, so she follows the feeling and finds Torj reading in a corner, brutally. She creeps on him through the shelves before Cal is like, "Hey, weirdo, maybe you should get back to your room now." So they start to walk away when a sudden scream echoes through the hallway. We cut back to Torj, who's nestled in for some light reading on horrific magical injuries, when he also hears the scream and goes to investigate. He finds a crowd of students standing around a bronze-haired body, but oh, thank goodness it's not Ren, it's just some other innocent girl that some assassins thought was Ren. He sprints over to Ren's room to find that Cal had brought her back after they also didn't bother doing anything about that dead girl. He then decides to yell at Ren for leaving her room because she's supposed to be trapped there whenever Torj decides he has something better to do. They get into a fight, and Torj thinks about how much he hates her, and then kisses her. You know what I hate? When all characters talk about is how much they hate someone before making out with them. Never in my life have I wanted to kiss someone I hate. Hatred is the beautiful feeling of wanting to punch someone in the head, not give them head. And I know what you're saying, Sunday, it's fiction, it's fun when they hate each other and then also make out hatefully. And I can get that sometimes, but it has to be done in a way that makes it just like feel right. And I feel like I've wanted this. And so far in the books that I've been reading, the authors haven't been good enough about building up the sexual tension despite the hatred, because if it really, really works, I can ignore it. But in these circumstances, it's not working. It's happening, I think it's happening too fast. Like, an enemies to lovers situation is not meant to get to them kissing in the first book. I feel like people are going to think I'm crazy for saying that, but it's true. Enemies to lovers requires a slow burn, because that's the only way you're going to get the most satisfying arcs out of both of your characters. Anyway, I need to get back to plot. That's all for this tangent. So Torch breaks off the kiss, and he was like, that was a mistake. So Ren shoves him out of her room. Farissa stops by a bit later and drops off some royal blood that Audra provided for her to experiment on. Don't ask who they got it from. No, really, because Ren asks and Farissa doesn't know. In their next class, the teams are given a scenario where they need to come up with a subtle way to take out an assassin who uses crossbows. I'm a little confused on how the school works sometimes, because it's mentioned that there's 4 teams in this class, but it's also been mentioned that there were 50 to 60 people in their year. It's normal for classes to be broken up into smaller groups of students, but the winners of this assignment get a ton of points, so are they all being graded across their year or just this class? If it's just the class, wouldn't that mean that the winning group in the other classes gets the same point boost? And we only know that points control when they get to start the gauntlet, so is there even that much incentive to get a lot of points if your team doesn't want to go first? I'm asking too many questions. So Ren, Xavier, and Dessa come up with a crossbow that injects poison when the trigger is pulled. The judges ask how they get the assassin to use it, and they'd say they either customize one they already own or have it sold to them as a new model, and apparently this is enough to get them the win. So my questions are, would the injection be strong enough to pierce gloves? And are we just allowing the assassin to still kill their target? Also, is the injection just a one and done, or would anyone else who uses this crossbow after get poisoned? I should have been on the judge panel for this. But whatever, they get their 50 points, they celebrate, it's amazing. Later, Torch is off in a meeting with some of the professors and Audra who's come to visit. So Ren, Kip, Cal, Dessa, and Xavier all run off to the bar on campus for some fun in between the harrowing events they have to deal with every day. In Torch's meeting, they tell him there's another assassination attempt against royalty, but the assassins suck, I guess, because there's 0-3 at this point. Torch also tells Audra privately that the power in his scars is stronger when Ren is near him, to which she's like, damn, that's crazy, and sends him on his way. At the tavern, the group is playing Never Have I Ever, and it's a pretty cute scene. I always appreciate when there's scenes where characters get to bond with their friends. Too many books only allow the main couple to have quality time together, and even then, the scenes where they just get to have fun are really rare to find, so this ended up being one of my favorite parts of the book. Torch comes in and looks at them all like a disappointed father, but reluctantly joins. Kip has him tell the story of how he came to be known as the Bear Slayer, which I forgot to bring up, but yeah, he's been called Bear Slayer a lot through this book. The gist of the story is that he killed 2 shadow-possessed bears that were attacking a village. That is how he got his legendary nickname. Torch also gets harassed by some lady when they're trying to leave, and I was starting to feel bad for him at this point, because he cannot go anywhere without women offering themselves to him, and I feel like that's gotta be so awkward. Ren fights off the random lady that's trying to climb Torch like a tree, and then he has to herd all of the drunken doofuses back home. We're like halfway through, but I gotta stop here, because if I'm being honest, my notes were kind of garbage for this book for some reason. I've made it work up until this point, but I feel like I have to read you guys this next one out as I wrote it. The next day, Ren is making a potion that reminds Torch of his mother. He opens up about his abusive father and how he killed him after he killed his mother. Later, they watch each other masturbate? Some time passes without major incident, besides maybe the one student that got poisoned by a professor for a lesson, but that wasn't overall plot relevant. It just makes me wonder what the students are going to be doing after this to justify this kind of training. Another professor named Crawford also hints to Ren that he knows she's the poisoner, so I guess she wasn't as secretive about it as she thought. Ren and Torj have a tender moment that Torj shoots down, so they haven't been talking for a few days when the gang is all squeezed into a cart to go to the city. They end up getting jumped by 24 masked people, and despite being vastly outnumbered, they manage to do pretty well. Minus Torj getting impaled by a spear and passing out, but Ren finishes the job, so it's fine. Torj is bedridden for a few days, but Ren takes care of him, skipping class in the process, which I'm sure Xavier and Dessa are thrilled about because they all need to pass together. I don't blame Ren for this, but I would hate to be the group partner of the queen who's in a situationship with her bodyguard, because you know she is not going to contribute to the final project and your mortality rate just shot way up. Once Torj is up and about again, he goes to see another person on his list of people with magical injuries, and meets a lady named Lillian, who tells him about how her childhood friend was injured by magic and she tried to take his pain away using her own empathy magic. She mentions he'd talk about his wound vibrating in the same way that Torj does, and when she takes Torj to see him, the man is tied to a bed. Lillian explains he tried to cut out his own heart, and I guess that was their solution? Is he going to be tied up forever? That's a question for later, though, because Torj has to get to the school library to stick his nose between some pages. And by pages, I mean Ren's vagina, because he eats her out in the library. Anyway, they go back to his room and she returns the favor, and they both see lightning coming off of his chest afterwards. The next day, Xavier tells Dessa and Ren that they're going to the city to get their crossbow made, which is like, why is Xavier the only one who was told about this? Unless he was the only one paying attention because Ren was too busy kicking her feet over Torj and Dessa was twirling her hair thinking about Kip. They've been a thing for a little bit, but it wasn't super relevant. Torj isn't allowed to go and he doesn't like it, but eventually agrees to stay behind. Once they get to the city, Ren is immediately hit with a dart and chloroformed. Ren wakes up in a gross dungeon and two dudes start beating the shit out of her while asking her questions about her and the school. She's confused about why they're asking how many greenhouses the school has when she realizes these aren't the rebels that have been trying to kill her for several months. They're about to sick some rats on her when another person comes in and tells them time is up. They're like, oh shit, congrats girlie, welcome to the gauntlet. And she gets let out. At this point, enough time has passed that Torj is freaking out. Audra's like, don't worry, she's just in the gauntlet. And he's like, the dangerous test that might kill her? And continues to freak out. Thea, Ren's sister, has also showed up at this point, so she distracts Torj by giving him a book about soul bonds. After reading it, Torj realizes his scars have a lot more in common with the soul bonds, so he asks Audra about it, and she's like, oh yeah, I had a feeling, but I sent you in the wrong direction just to make sure. Audra is that bitch, and I love her for it. Turns out, soul bonds make it, so if one of you dies, both of you die. Meanwhile, Ren finds Dessa and helps her out of her cell before they both run into Xavier, who leads them out of the dungeon. They run out into a forest and are chased by another team with mad honey disease? Is that real? Anyway, they just book it and run into another area that leads them into an underground maze. When they get to the center, a trap activates and fog fills the room and makes them all hallucinate. Dessa and Xavier run off, and Ren sees her friends and sister calling for her. She has to tearfully accept that they aren't real and that she needs to go back to what is, and takes an antidote to whatever the fog had going on. Dessa and Xavier also solve their shit off page, so we're good. A door opens, and they see the Hall of Drevnor and everyone waiting for them. Ren runs through and kisses Torj, and her team wins first place. And I was really like, that was it. That was the whole gauntlet. I was convinced that this part was a trick too, but no, it wasn't. That's the whole thing. That's all. It's over. Torj sees Ren's injuries and starts choking out the High Chancellor as if nobody was told the gauntlet was the most dangerous part of their school year. Belcourt does admit the torture is a new addition, but everyone is weirdly upset about this to me. Like, I thought people died in this test. What were they expecting? Adding torture is a bit rough, but the whole thing at the beginning was not saying anything about the school under any circumstances, so I kind of understand why it's there. Torj, Cal, and Kip help Ren with her injuries in her room, and there's a part where Torj gets aggressively jealous about Cal being too close to Ren, and I threw up in my mouth a little. Please stop these men from being so aggressive about their insecurity. Ren takes 2 weeks to heal up, and once she's good to go, she's immediately like, hey Torj, I'm open for business. He's finally down for it, but not in a boring old room. This woman is a queen. She deserves the best. So he takes her out to some grass. I'm mostly kidding. They go to a meadow, and the description is pretty, but banging outside comes with risks. And in a meadow, if you're not careful, this could become B-movie. Ren and Torj admit their love for each other and head back to the school. Torj goes to tell her about the soul bond, but Dessa shows up and is like, hey, we're about to graduate, by the way. They all rush to the graduation ceremony, and the other royals show up. I mean, it makes me wonder, do they have to go to every graduation for the school, like, every year? Is it that important, or is it because that Ren is graduating? Okay, whatever. I'm asking too many questions for a ceremony that lasts 0.5 seconds because the wall blows up and in comes an entire army led by a man in black, so you know he's evil. They all fight despite being vastly outnumbered, and the man in black is a force on his own because his shield absorbs Ren's lightning and he has a potion that makes him stronger. Torj gets hurt, but Xavier intervenes and tells the man in black that he shouldn't have come. The man says he joined the wrong side, and they're both thrown to opposite sides of the room by some sort of invisible force. The man says he knows he can get Ren through Torj, and he looks over to see Ren fucking dying of the exact same wound Torj has, and a cute little golden thread binding them together. Aw. Never mind, Torj grabs the apparently corporeal string and breaks it. The masked leader says they got what they wanted and has his army retreat, so the fight ends without any major casualties. Ren is passed out and is in a flashback from 12 years ago when she first met Torj after finding him injured against a tree. All of their memories together flash before her eyes, and she wakes up to find her wound healed. Pretty much no time has passed, though, because everyone's still scattered around in various forms of fucked up. Xavier is particularly bad, and Ren goes over to help and finds that the weapon that injured him was covered in the chemical that weakens royals. Ren gives him the potion that she'd been working on for Farissa and Audra, and it works, so they're all like, hey Xavier, what's going on there, bud? And he reveals that he's the Prince of Narva and has telepathy powers. After all that's taken care of, Ren goes to look for Torj and finds him in the garden. He uses this beautiful spot to break up with Ren, and I'm gonna be honest, guys, I was actually sad. Torj is whatever, but Ren's reaction to it is what made my heart hurt. She does eventually accept that it's over, despite knowing that there's something else going on, and she leaves. Torj is bummed about it too, but gives himself a pat on the back because Ren will be safe now that they don't share injuries, which is actually kind of fair. I don't usually give credit to characters who break up with their love interest under the guise of keeping them safe, but if this is the only way one of you won't be stabbed by a psychic knife every time the other is stabbed by a real knife, I can't really blame you. Oh, and one of the queens got kidnapped, so that's why the man in black was there. But life goes on, and 3 weeks later, Ren is explaining her royal saving potion to the professors and masters. She only agrees to give it to them when they agree to remove Torj as her bodyguard. So, has he still had to follow her around for like 3 weeks? That's really awkward. They take the deal, and Thea is installed as Ren's bodyguard in his place. That also seems like a bad idea to me, because if the assassination attempts are happening against royals, and you make Thea, Ren's sister, also her bodyguard, they're always going to be in the same place at the same time, so you could get 2 birds with 1 stone, essentially. But these assassins fucking suck, so I guess that there's nothing to worry about. So they both head off with the gang minus Torj to get drinks, and Xavier explains that Audra knew who he was and assigned him to Ren's team on purpose. Audra seems to have her sneaky little fingers in everything, and I would like to know more about her. And then Ren looks to Thea and says, I fought this war, so the next one is for you. Girl, what? The end. So, what did I like about this book? I think the biggest saving grace of this book was the side characters. Without Ren and Torj's group of friends, there wouldn't have been any levity because neither of them were particularly fun people. I liked Cal a lot, despite his minimal page time, and I honestly think the group of him, Kip, Dessa, and Xavier would have been great if they were the main focus instead. I haven't written off Ren and Torj entirely. I think there's a chance for them to get better in the subsequent books, but for this one, I didn't find them very appealing. It feels like a lot of authors think that in order to make their main characters interesting, they need to be cynical and traumatized, but I find myself more drawn to the people who are nice and traumatized. I'm also really glad that we got a flawed female character who isn't constantly being told she's the best and most amazing person on the planet. Ren's trauma is a detriment and something that she needs to work on to improve her life, and I cannot believe how little I see this in media now. Trauma obviously sucks, but confronting and moving past it in a healthy way is so important. I'm hoping that Ren isn't magically fixed because of the one hallucination she had in the gauntlet, but I will give credit for even just including this. And despite this book being part of a larger universe, I didn't feel like I was completely lost as I was going through it, which is good. The writing wasn't perfect, but I can appreciate when an author can have a multi-series universe without referencing the other books so much that it becomes illegible. So if you're going to try it out without reading the others, I don't think you'll have a bad time as long as you aren't the kind of reader who wants every relationship to be explained. No shade on the people who do, it just doesn't happen here. So what didn't I like? The writing wasn't that bad overall, but it suffered from information overload in a lot of areas. So many chapters consisted almost entirely of exposition or flashbacks, and it got to a point where it was hard to remember what was happening in the present. And for the amount that we were getting, the lore wasn't anything super deep, but I guess I've come to expect that from Romantasy at this point. The author also avoids the word said like nobody's business. It's okay to have characters just say things, guys, please. I learned this in the 3rd grade. Why am I still seeing it in professionally published books? I also didn't think Drevnor made a lot of sense, and maybe I'm just stupid, but I couldn't even figure out how long they're supposed to go there and what they get from graduating. Ren was already out there poisoning political figures. Like, what was she hoping to learn? Are there alchemist jobs that you can only get with a degree? There was so much information thrown at me in this book, but none of it had to do with the school where most of the plot takes place. And the way that it was built up, I thought the gauntlet was going to be after multiple years of training, so you can imagine my surprise when it starts in the last quarter of the book. And speaking of the gauntlet, wow, what a disappointment! This event was hyped up through the entire book as the biggest test of these people's lives, and it ended up being just a pretty sucky afternoon. Don't get me wrong, being tortured sucks, but I expect to see something that took what they learned and wrapped it into a satisfying culmination, but they mostly just ran around until they found the next thing. It felt like it was there because the author saw the big final test in other books and was like, oh, I should have one of those too, without thinking of the narrative impact that sort of event usually has. It also ties into Ren's development, which wasn't the worst thing ever, but the moment where she decides to move on from the deaths of her friends and her sister didn't feel like there was a lot of impact. It's hard to say where it fell flat, but I think it comes down to stakes. Ren makes the decision to leave them behind and live for the people she's come to love, but the only consequence, if she doesn't, is she fails a test. This is something that has haunted her to the point that she has regular PTSD attacks for years, and she's able to wipe her hands of it because she wants to graduate and get some dick. I probably would have inserted Dessa and Xavier into this scene and had them be a physical representation of Ren's choice, rather than having them run around off-screen. It also kind of sucked that they all resolved their hallucinations independently instead of working as a team. Like, maybe I'm cheesy, but I like the power of friendship, okay? Especially when that seems to be a theme in this story. And man, Torj did not make an impression at all. Outside of being a discount Geralt, he blends in with every other main male character to the point I couldn't find anything exciting about him. He's another victim of the overly aggressive and jealous love interest trope that romance authors love for some reason. Like, protectiveness is sexy when the female main character is being actively threatened. Torj was foaming at the mouth when their close, trusted friends would stand too close to Ren. Ew. Torj and Ren also lacked a bit of chemistry for me. I'm not sure why it seems to be such a problem in the romance genre, but I really wish there was more to their relationship than a heaping pile of arguing with a side of lust. They had a good couple moments, and Torj had some lines that would have had me clutching my chest if there was a better foundation for it, but ultimately I didn't find myself rooting for them. Like, their breakup as a plot point was not very impactful to me. I was like, okay. The villains, which I think was the People's Vanguard, felt kind of weird and out of place. Their assassins clearly suck at their jobs, and they had a tendency to pop out of the bushes like Team Rocket, which made them hard to take seriously. Why should I care that there's people trying to kill royalty besides that Ren is royalty? The massive power imbalance brought on by royals being the only ones in this world to wield magic makes me wonder if there's merit to this uprising. And if your villain group is going to be the one that's punching up, you better give me a damn good reason to not support them, because that plot can't fly very far in this economy. Alright, now it's time for the Best Character Award. Despite liking Cal the most, I'm giving this one to Xavier. He hits a lot of the common romantasy tropes for a main male character, but in a way that I don't hate, so that gives him points. I don't care much for secret royalty plotlines, but if he's an exiled prince, more points. Honorary mention is Audra because I like a messy bitch. She just wasn't on page enough to take first. And now for the divorce rating. This one is hard because Ren and Torj already broke up, but let's say they get back together with the same issues we saw in book 1. I still don't think they'd make it to marriage. They get engaged, but they're on and off the whole time before it finally just kind of falls through and they end it for good. And for my final rating, I'm giving Iron and Embers 3 stars. It has a lot of potential, and I'm interested in seeing how the characters grow in the next book, but the plot was kind of lacking, and the main couple wasn't quite enjoyable enough to push it up a tier. So yeah, not bad, but definitely areas for improvement. I think it could have been a lot shorter, just cut out a lot of the unnecessary exposition and insert necessary exposition, and I think it would have been a pretty solid book. But yeah, that was my trip through Iron and Embers by Helen Scheuerer. Be sure to let me know what you guys thought in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.